here at Starrlight Meadery. Don't have much for signage up. Observe Amy. And they've got a sign down there that says caution bees at work. I don't know if you can see that or not. Can't see anything with this display outside. And here's the different meads they've got. Got blackberry mead, sweet peach, spiced apple, and this is their traditional mead, the off-dry, semi-sweet, the off-dry blackberry. Okay.
Yeah, so if you look over under the window there, you'll see my pile of honey. That's a real low spec for me. Normally, I've got between 1 and 2 tons of honey in here, which pretty much fills up that area and some of the in the corner. I buy from beekeepers, and then I'll mark them in a way that I can tell which ones came from where, so that I can mix them up afterwards, get more of that flavor profile. I also taste them all to make sure, some of them taste so good that I want it to stand out a little bit more. I'll set that one aside and I'll use that for our semi-sweet, so that the semi-sweet has more of it has more of a honey flavor to it, based on whatever it is used to sweeten it. But I haven't gotten to that point yet, so let me get started on how I make a batch. So these are my primary fermenters now. These are 264 gallons each. So remember before I said that I was making it at home in 5-6 gallon containers. That first time that I went from a 6-gallon batch to a 264 gallon batch, I was at home going, please work, please work. There's a lot of honey. How many pounds of honey goes into 200? I was just going to get to that. That's a big investment to be like. Yeah. So the way that I made the first batch is that I grabbed a 5-gallon bucket of honey. I climbed to the top of a ladder, 60-pound bucket of honey, stupid Ben. Climb up the ladder and pour it into the tank. This has a floating lid on it, so of course I took the lid off first. I wasn't that stupid. Took the lid off, poured the honey into the tank. This is my big water filter over here. Takes the chloramine out of the water, which is something that the cities put in the water to kill any wild critters that might be in the water. Well, yeast is considered a wild critter, and I don't want it killing all the yeast that I'm about to put in this. So I filter all the chloramine out. I'm using warm water to just spray the inside of the bucket, get all the honey out of it. And then, just like on the side of the shampoo bottle, lather, rinse, repeat, I would grab another bucket, find the ladder, poured it in. So, yeah. That would be cool. So I end up putting in 13 5-gallon buckets, so 65 gallons of honey. And anybody that wants to do the math, it's 12 pounds per gallon, so you can figure out how many pounds is going into it, because I haven't figured that out. But if you are interested, it would be 1,040 of the little bears. But I decided that my forearms just couldn't take that, so decided to stick with 5-gallon buckets. So the first 5-gallon bucket went pretty easily. The last one, believe it or not, weighed about 6 times as much. So Becky was at the bottom of it pushing up, and I was at the top pulling. Finally get to the top and I pour it in, and about a quarter of it pours in, and the rest of it is all crystallized. Great. So I'm sitting there with the warm water, spraying the inside of it, trying to get behind it. Eventually, I was able to get enough water in there that it was getting behind it. Now my problem was that this clump of sugar was sliding out of the bucket, and I was holding onto the bucket, trying to make sure that it didn't fall into it. So I was at the top of this ladder, holding onto the bucket, as all of a sudden this big clump of sugar splashes into the bottom of it. So any of you that would like to taste our first mead,
It's on the ceiling.
top of the ceiling there. I've gotten much smarter since then. I purchased this, so now I have that sitting here. I pour the honey into it, I mix it with some water, and I'm able to pump it directly into this. Still have to do that 13 times to get my batch right, but it's much easier. So once I've got all of the honey in here, I continue to add water until it gets to the right sugar to water ratio. So I'm going for 23.5% sugar. Winemakers tend to measure things in bricks, which is the same thing as the percent sugar. So that's what I go for. If anybody's going to ask me what that is in specific gravity, I don't know. At some point I'll have to look it up because I keep getting that question. Anyway, so once it goes in here, I forgot to tell you about my cool tanks. Sorry, you have to listen to this part of it too. So these tanks, this one is just a flat bottom. This one has kind of a cone at the bottom for the yeast to settle in. Love this one much better than this one. But this was my first one. So the thing about this that made it a little bit more expensive than those other tanks that you see over there is that this one has the temperature gauge in it, so I know what temperature is inside the tank. It's also got the all-important sample valve. I'm not going to tell you what that's for, you can kind of guess. Actually, what's really important is watching the fermentation as it goes. So I'm here every other day or so, making sure that the fermentation continues to progress. And so I'm taking a small sample out, measuring the amount of sugar that's left in it, and then if it stops or if it slows down, then I'm opening it up and trying to take care of some things.
Do you add more yeast? Do you change the temperature? Do you add more yeast?
Typically it's nutrients, or it's I'm measuring the acidity, and the pH is just a little bit too high, and so I have to lower the pH a little bit. I haven't had to add yeast yet. Sure. I've never gotten to the point where it's completely stopped fermentation either. I'm usually catching it early enough that I can keep it going, which is a whole lot easier than trying to start it again.
Do you add yeast nutrient to it when you start it?
I don't. I add, so sorry about this geeky talk, but I add it in two parts. The first one is at about the 1/3 sugar break. So if it's got 23.5% sugar, then I wait until about 1/3 of that is gone, and then again,
give them something else to eat.
Yeah. So, and I use 2 different types of yeast nutrients. One of them is Fermentation, which is has yeast hulls in it as well, and a little bit more nutritious for the yeast. And then the other one is DAP, which is your standard diamine phosphate. Anyway, blah blah blah. Move on then. The other thing about this is that it's got the cooler on the side here, so if you're able to pump a cold liquid through here, and bring down the temperature without having to open it up and throw a bag of ice in and dilute the whole thing, because that would just be a shame. So I'm able to keep the temperature in here is usually around 65 degrees. That's the same temperature that I try and keep in the tank. However, fermentation is an exothermic reaction, which means that it creates some heat. As a result of that, there are times when especially in the summer, when I have to kick on the chiller, which is over here, pump 40-degree water through here and drop the temperature so that it doesn't give me some really nasty flavors. So one of the things, a lot of people talk about mead and they say, it takes a year to age at least. If you do it at the right temperature and you feed the yeast enough nutrients, then you don't have to. Most of the stuff that you drink here today is less than 3 months old. Yeah. So anyway, once I get the amount of water in here correct, I forgot one thing. So the yeast at some point is going to drop to the bottom of the tank, and then there will end up being about 4 to 5 gallons of yeast down at the bottom. It's just not very tasty. So this manway door is to be able to get all that yeast out. You can imagine trying to get all the yeast out of something like that. I'd end up having to tip the tank over and spray it out or something like that. And this way I'm able to collect the yeast and give it to one of the hog farmers who apparently hogs will eat anything. And so we're able to do that without getting rid of it.
So do you ever reuse some of the yeast that you have?
I don't.
Dead by the time you get
It's not all dead, but the majority of it is. This is going to end up being about 12.5 to 13% ABV, and the yeast tolerance that I use is 14%. Most of it's pretty much puckered out, and the act of washing it and so forth to get all of the dead stuff off is just way more work than I'm willing to do. So sure. The other thing, a lot of brewers will reuse their yeast. They're going through batches quickly. This is going to be in the tank for probably about three months before I'm finished with it.
There's a lot of variables to that.
Yeah, exactly.
And the gravity of beer is not nearly as high as the gravity of the mead is either.
Absolutely. Okay.
Not
So-
usually, anyway.
Do you use a wine yeast? Do you use a beer yeast?
It's actually a wine yeast. Again, anybody that is interested, it's Lalvin is the name of the company that makes it, and it's a 71B1122, which is one of my favorite yeast. It's an Arbonne strain of yeast, and it is the same type of yeast that is used in a lot of rosés and fruit wines because it keeps a lot of that fruity character, fruity esters. The honey we found, the way that we decided what type of yeast to use was we made a batch, a 5-gallon batch of honey and water, and then we split that between 5 different 1-gallon containers, and we put a different yeast in each one. We watched them ferment, we added the same amount of nutrients to each of them, we tasted each of them as it went, watched the flocculation, which is a wonderful word that I love to say. Flocculation is how the yeast drops to the bottom. So we watched all of those things, and then we picked the yeast that we liked the best. We did that experiment about, twice. We did 10 different yeasts. And the 71B1122 is the one that was the most consistent. It had the most honey flavor afterwards, even though it was dry, it still had some of that fruity character.
So do you put that chicken fresh, or is it dehydrated?
It's dehydrated. Yeah. And I use any of you that make wine or beer, there's a product called GoFirm that I use as a rehydrating agent that helps to increase the strength of the yeast before I finish it. Any other questions so far?
It's basically do a yeast starter.
Yeah. It's a yeast starter that because I was doing a yeast starter at first, and I found that the GoFirm did a better job with this. And I did yeast starters at home, a couple orange juice, and more information than you want. But I did a yeast starter at home, and I liked that process and so forth. I never used GoFirm at home. These tanks, as it would get towards the end, it was really slowing down. The fermentation process was really slowing down. By using the GoFirm, 6 weeks for the fermentation to go from 23.5% sugar to almost nothing, or just a little bit. It's usually close to about 1% sugar that's left. So in the process of doing that, all this fermentation is going on. The yeast is starting to drop to the bottom. Carbon dioxide is being released from the tank. There's a tube at the top of it that allow it to come out. There's a little bucket on the side that it bubbles through. So all of that's going on. Once it's finished, then it's another 6 weeks of trying to wait until the yeast drops to the bottom of the tank. And I've tried doing some things where I chill it a little bit, trying to
Cold crash it.
yeah, to hurry it along. What I found is that because the plates are all on the outside, I was ending up, I'd have that chiller on for 2 weeks at a time trying to drop the temperature. I was just creating this convection inside because the center of it was warm still. The outside of it was cold, and it would just start doing this, and that was kicking up more of the yeast than it. So anyway, after about 6 weeks, enough of it has dropped out. It's still fairly cloudy, but enough of it has dropped out that I can actually pump it through this filter. So this is my filter. The mead comes in through here. It goes into the side plate, and there is a slit in the side. I don't know if you can see that, but the mead can come into this slit. There's no other place for it to go. It comes into the plate, and then you've got holes in the sides here where it can come through. There's no place for it to exit on this side. So then,
You have never had a big bubble with it and all of those spraying on the sides or anything?
I'm very careful so that doesn't happen. So the filter goes in between here, and then the next one doesn't have a way for it to go out that way. That one's blocked. It's got the same holes over here and a slit over on this side. So it's able to get out on this side, comes out here, and it's fairly clear. So that gets pumped into these tanks over here. I do a 2-stage filtration. The first stage, I'm trying to get the big chunks out, and that's going to a 5-micron size filter. And then the next filtration goes to a 1-micron filter. The porosity of that filter would be enough to allow some of the yeast to get through. Yeast is actually, you have to go down to at least 0.45 in order to get all of it out. And I found that when I went to 0.45, I changed the flavor too much. I didn't like it. So I went back to a 1. So I still have some yeast in there, but they're to the point where they're at an alcohol tolerance where they're not likely to start re-fermenting, and I've put in a little bit of sorbate and sulfites to prevent that from happening as well. So once it goes into these tanks over here, that's the point where I can start adding the other flavors. So you guys have tasted it. Most of what we make starts out as our traditional off-dry, what was in this tank. And then I'll add blackberry juice to make our blackberry mead. I'll add peach juice to make our peach mead. I'll add spices and apple to make our spiced apple. Some of them are made in a smaller container over here, and that's the ones where our off-dry blackberry, we take the blackberry juice and use it to dilute the honey instead of using water. And that one will taste more like a red wine. The cranberry orange was made the same way. So anything where I'm adding the juice in it beforehand, that's going to be made separately. Most of the stuff, our 5 flavors that we carry at all times, are going to be our traditional off-dry, which is what comes out of this tank without anything else added. And then our blackberry, or our traditional semi-sweet, which is this plus more honey. Our peach and our blackberry, which is just this with those juices, and then the spiced apple. So, any questions so far?
You have dedicated tanks for each flavor,
No.
so you just change them around whenever you need them.
It's stainless steel. It cleans up real easy.
What do you use to clean with?
I use PBW. So it's Brewers. I don't know if you're.
Yeah, I know what it is.
It's
You use Star Sound?
It's made by the same company as Star San. I don't use Star San. I actually don't use a sanitizer. I use citric acid as a sanitizing agent. So it's I spray the side of the tank. I've got a pesticide sprayer type of thing, pump.
Yeah.
Which has never had pesticide in it. It's just had citric acid. It wasn't one that I was using at home.
Special batch.
Yeah. And so I'll spray the side of the tank with that, and it leaves a powder of citric acid when it dries. And so yeast and airborne stuff has a tough time living in that environment.
Basically kill all the bad bugs.
Yeah, pretty much. So let me switch places with you over here. So this is our bottling line. Basically, put four bottles on here. And then once I push the button, it's going to take about 30 seconds. It'll fill all of the bottles. There's no sensor measuring. That was good. There's no sensor measuring how much is in there. It's just a time sequence, but it fills them all at about the same level. So I'm able to just top them up to the same spot. So when I was doing this at home, I was filling one bottle at a time. It usually take 2 to 3 minutes to fill one bottle, and then another 20 minutes to clean up the mess off the floor. So this is a much better plan. You can see that it got to about the same level, and if I just add that much more, then it's now filled to the right level. So the next step is to corker. The iris here will just get smaller and compress the cork so that it's smaller than the neck of the bottle. And then the plunger just pushes it down into the bottle. So that lightens that. And then our next step is to capsule it. So we're using a PVC capsule. I should probably mention something about the corks. So these are Noma cork. It's a synthetic cork that we're using. They happen to be a local company, but that's not why I chose them. So natural cork can bring bacteria into the winery, and it's a low rate, but it's still something that people don't discover until they get home and open it. And I didn't want to have that happen to our customers. So Noma Cork is a company that makes synthetic cork that still breathes like natural cork does, so it can let the mead age. So that's why I chose them. I also like that you can store this standing straight up or on the side. You don't have to have it on the side like you do with natural cork. The next step is the PVC capsule. So this is just heat shrink. Becky worked at a winery for about 2 years getting experience with it. She used the metal capsules that most people use. She kept cutting her fingers when she would open up the bottles. So this is just heat shrink. Put it under this, pull it down. 2 seconds later, it shrinks it to the next level. So it's pretty simple, but it's also just hiding whatever happened when I was corking it. So if it flared the cork just a little bit because it didn't go in quite straight, we don't see that. The next step, come over here, is labeling. So this is where it has power. I push the button, it will turn the bottle and apply the label at the same time. When it gets to the next bottle or next label, it stops, which is pretty cool. I decided to pay for the automation on this one and not on the corker, because the corker, the expensive ones that you push the button and it slams the thing in, started about 10 grand. That was a little more than I could handle. And this, while it's not nearly as expensive, it's important, especially since I'm usually drinking with volunteers while we're while we're doing this. It's important that at the end of it, the label be about as straight as it was at the beginning of the evening when we started. So that's how this all works. So anybody have any questions? Yeah, I do a thorough cleaning in between every batch.
Is that just using the same? That's not the same as using a cleaning agent on that?
I don't use a cleaning agent because I never have it sitting in there. And I do whatever I'm doing today. I rinse it through with clean water. I rinse it through with citric acid. I let it dry.
Is blue a traditional wine color?
Blue is, yeah, well, so the reason we use blue bottles is because Becky likes blue. And then we also thought, okay, our last name is Star, so we've got Starlight as our theme, and, you know, Starlight with the blue seems to work well, you know, night sky type of thing. And then we thought, oh wait, Rieslings are usually in blue, so the sweeter stuff usually was in a blue bottle, so we thought, okay, we can get away with that. But yeah, the real reason is Becky likes it.
Good reason.
How many,
Becky was the one that designed our logo.
Yeah.
I like blue bottles.
how many different recipes did you go through before you found your winning one? Sort of happened upon it your first try, or were you doing a lot of
Well, so that was the first sliced apple that I had tried, yes. But I mean, I've made lots of, I've made a bell pepper mead that was nasty. I've made lavender that was really bad. I've made a good one now too. The lavender tasted like perfume. I've made, trying to think of what some of our other, well, cranberry orange is a good example. I had this idea in my head that I wanted to do a cranberry orange, and I thought that I wanted to have anchovy peppers in it. And so I made up a 5-gallon batch, and I split it and decided, okay, well, this one I'm just going to put some vanilla sugar in it to see how it tastes. It's a little bit sweeter, a little bit of vanilla in the background. The next one, I took an ancho chili and I dried chili and I threw it in there, let it rehydrate it in the jar. The next one, I'm eventually going to let them go. They keep asking questions. The next one, I put chipotle pepper in it. And it was kind of at a whim. I had made a orange cranberry relish for Thanksgiving one year that called for chipotle pepper, and I love spicy. I decided to throw that in there, but I really didn't expect that one to be good. I wanted the ancho chili to be the best one. We ended up tasting all of them. The third one, or the last one, I left as pure, so if we wanted to try something else, I had something to try. So we ended up tasting the sweeter one, which was pretty good. And then we tasted the one with ancho, and it had this nasty metallic and green flavor that I just did not expect. And then we tasted the chipotle, and I was like, wow. It kind of went from here to here to here to here. I mean, it was a wonderful flavor profile. So now we've got those two. But most of the time, my recipes, when I put them together in my head, it pretty much tastes what I expect. I don't know how that happens exactly, but
You played around with chocolate, ain't you?
chocolate we have. We'll be starting our chocolate orange recipe soon. But don't get your hopes up because it's about a 2-year process for me.
Oh.
But yeah, I use cocoa powder in the fermentation tank, which changes the pH and makes the fermentation process go much slower. And then it's got to age for a little while, and I age it on cocoa nibs to get more of the cocoa flavor. So it tastes really good afterwards. The nickname that Becky had for it was the cure for PMS. But I'm pretty sure that...
Unless you're the one making it.
Yeah, the feds probably won't let me put that on the label, so... Everything that I'm making...
or we aren't asked to
Unfortunately, they won't even let us do that. Everything that I make has to get federal approval for the formula, and then also federal approval for what's on the label. So.
Where's the federal person you have to talk to?
No, they're in Cincinnati. So when I put it, it's all online. I submit it. They tell me no. I say why. They tell me because this, and this. I change that. Then they say no. Why? They change this too.
What about carbonation? Are you guys toyed with that idea?
Neither of us, Becky nor I, like carbonated mead much, so we haven't really. If you're going to carbonate something that's dry, then we've got most of the equipment that we would need. But if you want it to be sweeter at all, and most of what we sell is sweet. Not most of what we make, but what we sell.
Right.
And so trying to get what we would need in order to carbonate something that's going to remain sweet would be tough.
Just an idea. I was in Minneapolis and they had tasting just like this, but they started doing carbonation. And what they would do is they would just have like one of those 0.2 ounces in a growler. You would just come in and refill the growler as opposed to putting it into the bottle. And so they just had their own separate tanks, and so you had to come back and refill.
So they carbonated it with CO2.
I'm not sure that that's legal.
Is that not?
It may be there. So North Carolina, so if it's within the state, if it's sold within the state, then it goes by state guidelines. But North Carolina has said we're just going to accept whatever the feds say. So we have to have everything with federal approval before the state will rubber stamp it. So when I submit anything, I submit it to the feds, they say yes, and then I submit it to the state, and they say, well, the feds said yes, so yes. And by the way, I'll cash your check. So that's, I'm not sure if it would be the same way in Indiana, but yeah, they don't allow us to reuse bottles. We have to use a clean bottle every time, and unless they have
They exchange a bottle, I don't know about that.
I'm not sure how they would do it. But, and they could have the facility to be able to clean the bottles. We didn't want to do that because we don't want to be inspected by yet another agency. If we clean bottles, if we make food, we have to be inspected by the local department as well. Any other questions?
Have you heard anybody try those, have you heard anybody try how they have those soda machines now where you can, have you heard anybody try and carbonate meat with mother?
I have not.
Because that's almost worth trying. I know, that's what I was thinking. Because I was like, well, I really like it and I can't find it here, so I might as well try a soda stream and see if it's worth it.
Well, we've talked about trying to take our traditional off dry and put it in a keg and see how it would taste. Because there are a lot of bars that would like to carry mead, but trying to get bottles in there is real tough because, we don't sell in a single container. It's usually 4 or 5 out of a bottle. And mead, just like any other wine, oxidizes once it's open.
So most of us tasted bad meat at the restaurant.
Yeah.
Hard to get them to try.
Exactly. So we've toyed with the idea of trying to keg some of our stuff, which would carbonate it somewhat. I mean, it wouldn't have to be, but anyway. But we haven't gotten anything beyond the what if we did that.
Sure.
Okay, other than you, any other questions? I'm joking. They're all thirsty.
I know. They can go.
And that's fine with me. Okay, well, if that's it, then I'll get out of your way. See, you notice how I blocked the door so that you can't leave? Come on out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's 65 gallons of honey, 200 gallons
Do you have
of
the
water.
scaled down version? Because I'm gonna start playing around making some of my own mead, and it's going to be in a 5-gallon carboy.
Yeah, so if you're going with a 5-gallon carboy, you're probably looking at closer to 15 gallons, 15 pounds of. Try that again. 15. You said 5 gallon?
Yeah.
Yeah, 15 pounds of honey, so it's going to be about a gallon and a quart of honey. I would suggest a wildflower honey, or find a beekeeper that you know and get some honey from them. The rawer the better.
Right.
I don't boil anything. I don't know said you do beer.
Yeah.
So a lot of beer brewers like to boil because they're used to that.
What I do with my beer, if I put it in my, well, with my honey, if I put it in the beer, is I throw it in at the end of the boil after the boil's over with,
So
just to where it's like up around about 180 degrees or something like that. Just,
yeah. So I personally feel that that changes the flavor of the honey quite a bit. So
Yeah.
I don't do that, but it's up to you. It is a difference in how people like to do it. But the warmest, I'm using water that's probably about 80, 85 degrees in order to help dissolve the honey. I'm sorry, it's closer to 100 degrees, but by the time you get the honey in there as well, it's down to about 85 degrees.
so you pitch your yeast at 85?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just a matter of taking if you use one of the packets of the 71B1122, that one will ferment all of that honey out, and you'll probably have about 1 or 2% residual sugar at that point.
And how many weeks? Think about 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that?
Fermentation on that is probably going to take, if you add a little bit of citric acid to it as well, or an acid blend of some sort, probably about a quarter of a teaspoon is all that you would really need. That will change the pH enough that the yeast will be able to act on it and probably finish in about, it would probably be close to about 6 weeks.
Okay. So what's the pH you're looking to maintain?
You want it to be lower than 4. So 3.8, 3.6 is good. You get down to 3.4 and it's going to go crazy, but you're going to notice the taste if you do that.
So you don't want it getting down that low, or it'll give you weird off flavors.
Yeah, well, not necessarily off flavors, as you're going to have, the acidity isn't going to go anywhere. So once all that sugar's gone, you're going to have something that's very tart, and you'll notice that tartness. If you've got a little bit of sugar left in it, then it'll balance.
Right.
But if you're going to dry or near that, then you need to have a little less acidity, or else it's just going to taste.
Yeah, I like the sweet better. I don't want it being super tart.
Yeah. So if you go down.
Okay, here's the Caution Honeybees at Work sign, and there is a couple beehives that they use to make their honey with. I don't know if you can see it on the camera or not, but we've got lots of bee activity, and this is about as close to them as I'm going to get because I don't feel like getting stung today. Hope you guys enjoyed the meadery tour. We had a lot of fun. Got a couple bottles of mead, and they're also on Facebook. I'll post the link down in the comments section so you guys can check that out. If you're ever in the Pittsboro, North Carolina area, definitely come check them out. And that's it for today. Cheers.